Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
Here's a crazy story from when I worked at a staffing agency. Right after finishing my business degree, I got a job as a staffing coordinator. I was new to the job and still figuring things out. The job was pretty straightforward most days, matching qualified workers with companies that needed them, handling paperwork, and occasionally dealing with the usual workplace drama. You know, people not showing up for their shifts or having conflicts with co-workers. Nothing I couldn't handle. But this one day, oh boy, I was about to experience something that would make all those other issues seem like a walk in the park. It started with a phone call around 10 a.m. I answered with my usual professional greeting, but the woman on the other end immediately launched into an angry tirade. She demanded to speak to someone about one of our workers immediately, saying the situation was completely unacceptable. When I offered to help and asked for details, she launched into a lengthy complaint about a male worker we had supposedly sent them. She described how he showed up late every day, did poor quality work, and was verbally aggressive toward other employees. She even gave an example of how he had told her assistant to mind her own business when questioned about taking unauthorized breaks. While she continued ranting, I was frantically searching through our system for any record of this worker. Nothing. I tried different spellings, nicknames, everything I could think of. This was the kind of situation that could seriously damage our reputation. I tried to maintain my professional composure and asked her to confirm when the worker had started the assignment. She angrily replied that it had been 2 weeks ago and that every single day had been a nightmare. She claimed she had been trying to reach someone about this for days, still finding nothing in the system and no record of her company. In our active client list, I apologetically explained that I was having trouble locating the specific placement and asked her to confirm the worker's full name again. This only made her more furious. She started questioning our company's competence, incredulous that we could send such a horrible worker and then not even be able to find him in our system. She demanded to know what kind of operation we were running. I was sweating bullets now. My manager was in a meeting, and this woman was getting more agitated by the second. When I carefully asked her to confirm if the placement was made through our agency, she responded with exasperation, saying, of course it was, through professional staffing partners. That name caught my attention. I'd never heard of them. I carefully asked if they were also working on this role, which confused her. When I clarified by asking if she was working with professional staffing partners as well as us, she asked what I was talking about. I explained that she had reached staffing solutions, not professional staffing partners. There was a long pause, the kind of pause that feels like it lasts forever. Then she mumbled that she had dialed the wrong number. Before she could hang up, I couldn't resist adding a polite but pointed suggestion that she might want to double-check the number next time before yelling at someone for 15 minutes about something they had nothing to do with. I wished her a great day, and the call ended. I sat there for a moment, letting it sink in that this woman had spent 15 minutes berating me for something that had absolutely nothing to do with our company. Later that day, I looked up professional staffing partners. Turns out they were our biggest competitor in the area. A few months later, she'd been removed from her position due to her aggressive management style and inability to maintain professional relationships. My family and I moved into our dream home about 6 months ago. We'd saved for years, worked overtime, and finally managed to buy a beautiful house with a pool in what we thought was a quiet neighborhood. The previous owners had warned us about one neighbor, a middle-aged woman who lived alone next door. They mentioned she'd complained about noise a few times, but we didn't think much of it. We're a normal family. My wife, our 3 boys, aged 12, 9, and 6, and me. We're not party animals. We just enjoy spending time together. Last Sunday was quite hot, so I decided to take the kids swimming. My wife was visiting her sister, so it was just me and the boys. We were having a great time, splashing around, playing Marco Polo, and just being a family. The kids were laughing and squealing with joy, but it wasn't excessive, just normal pool fun. That's when it happened. I heard our gate swing open, and there she was, our neighbor, standing at the edge of our pool in her gardening clothes. She immediately started screaming at us, demanding that we shut up, saying she couldn't take the noise anymore. I tried to handle the situation calmly, telling her she was trespassing and asking her to leave our property so we could discuss this civilly. But she wouldn't listen. Instead, she started ranting about how people like us had come to ruin their peaceful neighborhood. The racist undertones in her voice were unmistakable. She kept emphasizing you people in a way that made my skin crawl. I tried to stay calm for my kid's sake and warned her that I would have to call the authorities if she didn't leave. That's when my youngest son whispered to his brother, calling her a Karen. Unfortunately, she heard him. Her face turned really red, and she stormed off. Less than a minute later, she came charging back through our gate holding what looked like a portable jump starter. She positioned herself at the edge of the pool and started threatening us, saying she would drop the device in and electrocute us all. She kept her finger hovering over the power button, taunting us with the threat. I've never moved so fast in my life. I shouted for my kids to get out of the pool immediately, which thankfully they did. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. I barely had time to tell the dispatcher our address and situation before Karen charged at me. She shoved me hard, grabbed my phone, and threw it into the pool. Fortunately, the dispatcher had already gotten enough information to understand the severity of the situation. What happened next was like something out of a crime show. 2 police cars arrived within minutes, lights flashing. They took my statement and reviewed my doorbell camera footage, which had captured everything from her initial trespassing to her assault. When they went to her house, things got even crazier. She answered her door holding what appeared to be a weapon, causing the officers to take defensive positions and draw their weapons. It took 2 hours, 4 more squad cars, and a crisis negotiator, but they finally got her out in handcuffs. Later, I learned she was charged with multiple felonies: trespassing, assault, making terroristic threats, interfering with an emergency call, and resisting arrest. The police search of her house revealed she had been keeping a detailed journal of all our offenses, including times our kids played in our yard, when we had family over for barbecues, and even when we took our trash out. She'd apparently been planning to teach us a lesson for months. She's now awaiting trial, facing up to 15 years in prison. We got a restraining order, and her house went up for sale last week. My kids are still a bit shaken, but we're working through it. We've actually grown closer to our other neighbors, who came forward with their own stories about her previous threatening behavior. The pool is still our favorite spot, and we refuse to let one person's hatred rob us of our family time. If anything, we splash a little louder now, not out of spite, but because we know we have the right to enjoy our home in peace. Turns out she'd been causing trouble for over a decade, targeting families with kids and pets. The police found recordings and notes full of bizarre complaints and conspiracy theories about families moving in to bother her. She is now undergoing a psychiatric evaluation. Her house sold to a sweet couple expecting their first child, and we've already invited them for pool days next summer. It's amazing how something so bad brought us all closer. I've been working at this small tech company in Michigan for about 5 years now. Started as a regular software developer, but through consistent hard work and dedication, I worked my way up to being the technical lead. My boss noticed my people skills and started trusting me with more responsibilities, including conducting interviews when he's away. The company's not huge, just about 40 people, but we've built a solid reputation in our area. We pay above average salaries, and everyone gets treated fairly. It's the kind of place where people stick around because the work-life balance is actually decent. So last week, my boss was heading out for vacation, but before leaving, he'd scheduled an interview with this guy for a senior developer position. He asked me to handle it and give him my thoughts. The moment this guy walked in, something felt off. He had this air of superiority that didn't match his appearance, dressed way too casually for an interview, slouching in his chair like he owned the place. Looking at his CV, I noticed he started his career at 19 as a tour guide at some tourist attraction. Somehow, within a few months, he became their chief technician while still studying electrical engineering. When I asked about his previous work experience, he launched into a self-glorifying speech about how he was the chief technician at his last job. He bragged about starting when he was just 19, before even finishing his bachelor's degree. He mentioned that the place went under last year, but made sure to emphasize that he had run their entire technical operations. I tried to sound impressed and asked him about his responsibilities. He just kept boasting about how he was their youngest chief technician ever, and that everyone relied on him for solutions. The conversation was going okay until we got to the salary discussion. When I asked about his expectations, his true colors really showed. He declared that he was making $12,000 per month at his previous position, and given his experience and expertise, he expected at least that much here. Actually more, he added, considering inflation. I tried to keep my expression neutral while telling him that his expectation was quite above our usual range for the position. His response was pretty arrogant. He went on about how he'd been a chief technician since 19, had all this experience and skills, and wouldn't accept anything less. Later that day, I called my boss to discuss the interview. When he asked how it went, I explained about the applicant's $12,000 monthly salary demand, and how he claimed to have earned that much at a job he got right out of high school. My boss didn't even hesitate before telling me to send a rejection email, saying we didn't need that kind of entitled attitude here. The next day, I sent the standard rejection email. Within hours, my inbox was flooded with messages from him. He started ranting about how unacceptable this was, and how we were making a huge mistake, claiming that companies were fighting to hire him. I kept it professional and simply replied that our decision was final, wishing him luck in his job search. That just made him angrier. He accused me of being jealous because he made more money at 19 than I probably made now, and threatened to tell everyone about how our company treats top talent. I ignored his messages, but a week later we discovered he'd been leaving negative reviews about our company on job sites. He was claiming we discriminate against experienced professionals and underpaid talented engineers. The funny thing is, those reviews actually helped us. They showed exactly why we didn't hire him. He is still job hunting. Apparently, no company in Michigan is willing to match his previous salary, which makes me wonder if he was even telling the truth about it in the first place. Sometimes I check job boards and see him arguing in the comments with recruiters about market value and knowing your worth. I guess some people have to learn the hard way that one lucky break doesn't set your value forever. After 20 years of city living, I finally achieved my dream of owning a house in the suburbs. As a landscape architect, I'd spent countless hours designing outdoor spaces for others, but never had the chance to create my own garden. The modest 3-bedroom house was imperfect, but it had potential, especially the yard. I closed on the property last spring, excited to finally have my own space to transform. The homeowners association seemed reasonable enough during the purchase process. The rules were standard. Maintain your property, no excessive noise, standard paint colors, the usual stuff. What I didn't account for was my next-door neighbor, who I'll call Karen since that's exactly who she is. I first met her during my move-in. She stood at her window watching my moving truck like a hawk. I tried being friendly, waving as I carried boxes inside, but she just scowled and made notes on her ever-present clipboard. That should have been my first warning. For the first few months, I focused on the house's interior. But as spring approached, I couldn't resist the urge to start on the garden. I drafted several designs, finally settling on a cottage-style garden with daisies, tulips, and some flowering shrubs. Nothing outrageous, just a cheerful mix of colors to brighten up the neighborhood. I was planting the last batch of tulip bulbs when I heard the sharp click of heels on concrete. Karen demanded to know what I thought I was doing. When I casually mentioned I was just gardening, she immediately launched into a tirade about how I couldn't plant these flowers here. She claimed it was a violation of Section 12.4 of the Homeowners Association guidelines, thrusting her clipboard in my face and pointing at a highlighted paragraph with her perfectly manicured nail. I tried explaining that I'd read the guidelines, which only specified that yards must be well maintained. I started to explain that these were all carefully planned, but she cut me off. She insisted these weren't native plants and that the rules clearly stated we must maintain the natural ecosystem. She brought up her position on the Homeowners Association Beautification Committee. When I questioned whether she was on the board, she admitted she wasn't technically a board member, but claimed that her 15 years of residence meant she knew what was best for the community. I attempted to reason with her about the plants being drought resistant, but she wouldn't hear it. She declared she was reporting this to the board, adding a snide comment about newcomers thinking they could waltz in and destroy property values with garish displays. She stormed off, clipboard clutched to her chest like a shield. I stood there, dirt-covered and baffled, before an idea started forming. If she wanted native plants, I'd give her native plants. I spent the next week researching local flora. As a landscape architect, I knew exactly what I was looking for. Devil's walking stick, with its nasty thorns. Prickly pear cactus, which technically was native to our area. Stinging nettle strategically placed along the property line. And the pièce de résistance, a massive bull thistle right where it would be visible from Karen's kitchen window. The installation took a weekend. I carefully placed each plant, ensuring they were artfully arranged in a way that looked deliberately chaotic. The yard resembled a desert crossed with a medieval torture garden, but every single plant was documented as native to our region. 3 days later, right on schedule, Karen appeared. She was absolutely outraged, declaring that my yard looked like a wildlife preserve. I responded with enthusiastic agreement, thanking her for her advice about native plants. I started explaining about the devil's walking stick, describing it as a fascinating species native to our exact region. I pointed out the patch of stinging nettle, adding cheerfully that the bees absolutely loved it. She accused me of making a mockery of community standards. I offered to show her my documentation proving every plant was native, as per section 12.4. I even mentioned having fascinating historical records about how these plants were used by indigenous peoples in our area, and offered to share my research. She turned an interesting shade of purple and walked straight to the Homeowners Association office. The next day, I received an email requesting a yard inspection. I welcomed the board members with a detailed presentation about each plant species, their historical significance, and their role in the local ecosystem. I even prepared handouts with scientific names and care instructions. The following week, Karen received 2 notices, one for harassment of neighbors and another for her own yard, which apparently contained several non-native ornamental plants. The board also revised the guidelines to specify aesthetically pleasing native or non-native plants that maintain property values. These days, I still maintain my native plant garden, though I've added some less aggressive species. I've even started offering free consultations to other neighbors about incorporating native plants into their landscapes. The neighborhood has become something of a local attraction for botanists and ecology students. Karen sold her house 3 months later, muttering about declining neighborhood standards. Her replacement is a delightful retired botany professor who absolutely adores my devil's walking stick collection. I still have the clipboard she threw in my yard during her final meltdown. I use it to take notes when I'm planning new additions to my garden. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.